Alright, so I figured that today would be about as good of a day as any to discuss type solder jigs. Now, type solder jigs are a very typewriter specific type of tool, and they can be quite difficult to come by, and there's not a lot of information out there surrounding them. So a couple of people have asked me if I would kind of discuss the various uses of these jigs and just kind of give a lay of the land of what they are and how you properly employ them when you're trying to work on typewriters. So at the shop, I have 3 different kinds of type jigs, one of which is a universal type bar jig that can accept type bars of a wide range of manufacturers. And the other 2 styles that I have are specific type jigs that fit onto the type guides of portable typewriters and allow you to adjust the type while it's on the machine. These 2 over here on the left are the style of jigs that fit onto the machine itself. And this one clamped in the vise is the universal solder jig. All of these tools have a common plate to them, and it is a small rectangular piece of metal with a raised slot. And if you look very closely at that raised little notch of metal there, it is actually beveled on one side. And that bevel is very important. And if I can find a piece, and if we look at the edge of a piece of type, you will notice that the edge of the type, and I can shoot some B-roll of this, is also beveled. The type starts out wide on the bottom to give a nice foundation for surface impact and narrows to a precision edge for a good quality print. So that lower bevel is actually going to line up just right on the small out-hanging shelf of that plate. So this plate actually came from this jig on the side here, which has a adjustment screw built in, and so we can move this to almost any position that it needs to be in. We also have a springed lever here, same as on this jig here. And what this does is once you mount this to the type guide on a machine, you can hold the type bar up into position against the alignment plate while you're doing your soldering work. I think I'm going to actually have to do some minor assembly on one and see if I can get a type guide installed on a Royal in the back room, just so I can kind of show you what that process is supposed to look like. As usual, I am horribly prepared for any sort of video that I intended to do today. But yeah, if you have just a standard Royal typewriter like this one, if I can get that in, and unfortunately I don't even have the screws. Yeah, it looks like this type guide is not for that particular machine. So let's grab another lovely condition typewriter and see if this fits here. It does not, so we'll just pretend like it fits just fine on this machine. And look at that, it's like a brand new typewriter. So if we look at the front surface of this type jig, we'll see that it has a large round washer. So we will just take our screwdriver here and undo that round secured washer plate. The type solder jig is going to go back behind our guide, and ordinarily it wouldn't pop off the machine to do this. So this is how the jig would sit on your machine. And notice that you're going to basically want your carriage to be off of the machine, because once that jig is on there, there is really no room for your carriage to move. And I'll bring this piece up a little closer. Hopefully we can focus on it. The type guide of the machine rests right on the bottom of your alignment plate, and it's clamped down with that round washer piece. So of course, as you angle a type bar up into the guide, you clamp it down and you align it onto your alignment plate. So let's say we want to align the 6 and clamp it down so it fits well in there. Now ordinarily when performing these adjustments, we're going to want to choose a character that is in proper alignment in order to align our type guide plate with the correct measurements and then compare that with one that is not aligned. The downside of a unit like this is that you're not able to type test your machine as you're going along. You can see the head of our type slug pressed firmly against the alignment plate with the bottom beveled edge of the bottom character aligned with the protruding little beveled shelf on the alignment plate, held in place under tension with the spring clamp. Some of them, like this one here, has slightly different front placements, so we can stick that on a variety of other types of ribbon vibrators. And it also has the little plate for ones with the large holes in the type guides, like those Royal Portables. They can be useful tools, but I think what is the most useful style of type guide is the universal type guide. And this little jig requires you to take the type bar off of the machine and do your soldering adjustments. So of course you're going to want to take 2 type bars off the machine, one with a proper alignment so you can get everything lined up, preferably the one that's right next to the one you're working on, and then you're going to take the one you need to adjust, put it in the solder jig and fix it. Operation of this is pretty simple. You have a small adjustment screw on the base here, and that just controls how low that your type bar can sit in the jig. We can take that out right now because we have 3 different positions in which that can go. We also have a small adjustment that swivels the head of the jig, and this is to accommodate the different angles of every character, because as you go wider out into the type basket, your type will angle one way or the other. We also have our alignment plate on the top with an adjustment screw to move that in any position that you would like it to be in. And it has our little beveled shelf on there, as all the others do. And then around the back, we actually have this pin that is chained to the jig itself and a variety of holes in the side. And that is to accommodate one of the 2 pivot points on every single type bar. We will have our main pivot point in the front and then the linkage connection in the back on the end there. And either of those 2 points can be used. You'll just want to slot the type bar in, making sure that the curved edge is going to be lining up with the slot in your curvature adjuster. Find one of those holes in which the type bar fits into, and we can pin it in place. As you can see, the type bar is free to move up and down, and then we will adjust the angle first so that our type bar slots down into the curved part of the jig, and then we can tighten the angle down so we have our type bar held nice and snugly in place. And then at that point is when I like to put our stopper in the bottom, and we will adjust that so it hits the very bottom edge of the type bar, lock it in place. So now we know that we can't physically push that down anymore. And from there we just adjust the type alignment plates again so that little bevel on the plate is aligned with the bevel on the bottom of the type slug. And this is where it is handy to have a light shining behind so you can see those minute gaps which could measure fractions of a millimeter. So once that's adjusted, the nice thing about this is you can just slot your type bar up and put a new one in. Now theoretically you should be able to replace that with any type bar and have it swing around and it'll be aligned to whatever angle you need it to be. And then we can just clamp it down in any sort of holding placement, heat that up, move it around, swap it if need be, and you'd be good to go. So we're going to demonstrate a quick alignment on a Smith Corona flat top portable. The big problem with that machine is the bars don't properly fit in my jig. So I'm going to kind of show you how I'm getting around that. Super duper shiny, clean, smooth, new rubber. I don't really have a clean piece of paper, but we'll just put in this little bit of note card and type the alphabet. And once we have the alphabet typed, we can kind of review this little piece of paper. You can look and see that the A is not quite aligned. It's actually printing I'd say about a 1/2 millimeter to a little bit more above the writing line, and that is what we need to lower down. I know I said that you want to pull 2 type bars to align 2 type bars, but since I know that single one just needs to be dropped a little bit, I'm going to try and do that manually. We're going to need a small push rod type thing. I have a long handle screwdriver with a very fine point, and I'm going to apply that to the bearing rod of the type basket just to push it out the side there. And I don't know if you can see on camera, but we're sticking up a little bit. We'll take our pair of pliers. I got a pair of duckbill pliers here and slowly pull that out. Now I'm going to hold the A-type arm. We can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to tug it up a little bit until I just feel it slip off that bearing rod, because I don't want to undo more type bars than I have to. And ideally you would have a second bearing rod to slot into the side, but all of the ones I have don't seem to fit this model. I am going to find a place where the pivot fits, which looks like is about right there. And we'll pin that in place and swing it around and adjust. And the issue that I've been having with these bars is not only is it difficult to find a pivot that will allow the curved ends to fit into the angle slot, but also the type bar itself is actually too thick to fit all the way down in that slot. Clamp our angle down so the type bar is at least straight on the plate, and then we'll adjust our lower limiter stopper, tighten that up. And the other thing that I've been doing, because these don't quite fit, is I'm taking a small plastic clamp. Oh, I just knocked my pin out. I'm taking a small plastic clamp and putting it around the entire jig itself to hold that type bar down and ensure that it is not going to move at all. And from there, I can adjust my type plate. And once I have it flush and I know that the beveled edges are lined up, I will just gently move that down the small amount that I want it to be, which is about slightly more than a 1/2 millimeter. I'd say maybe 0.7 of a millimeter. So we'll put this down into our bench vise, and then we get ready to solder. So what I'm using now is just a propane torch. We'll light it up and apply heat directly to the type slug. And it only takes about 5 or 6 seconds for the solder to flow. And you'll kind of see it liquefy a little bit, and maybe give it a couple seconds after that to really kind of move around. And then we'll just slowly take the edge of the screwdriver and tap our type slug. And once that is done and settled, I will take my finger, dip it in a little bit of water, drop that water right on there so it sets quickly. And then we can remove the pin and remove the type bar and just kind of quench it in a little bit of water so it's not hot to the touch. And from there, we just reinstall into the machine and test. And hopefully, and this is the issue I often have, is I didn't move the A down too far. And would you look at that? I think that is about as perfect as we're gonna get. I guess I didn't really expect to be doing this video right now, but I knew I had this job sitting on the bench and I wanted to get that done. And I want to address Megan at Unplugged Typewriter Co. and say, here is your video on how to use a type solder jig. I hope that's helpful. Always reach out to me if you have any questions about procedures, what I do, what you want to do, what you want to learn how to do, and I will do my best to make that a reality, because the end goal here is to make sure that typewriters are preserved into the future. On a note about soldering, I do want to mention that whenever you're soldering, you want to use solder flux. And solder flux is a liquid cleaning and bonding agent, and that's going to ensure that your solder flows evenly and bonds correctly with the metals that you're trying to attach. I'm using 60-40 lead tin solder. I don't really think it matters that much, since most solder is an alloy of lead and tin. As long as you're heating evenly and making sure that everything is flowing thoroughly, you should be fine with whatever solder you have. I would hesitate to mix lead-free solder with lead solder, but feel free to try whatever it is that you've got on hand. And I think that about sums it up. I hope this is a short, informative video, and it covers everything that I really wanted to cover. I also want to thank Joe Van Cleave for recommending these Rhode Wireless Go microphones. This is the first time I'm using them. I did do a test video the other day, but I never actually looked at the results, so that was pretty much a waste of time. So hopefully the audio in this video sounds just a little bit better than it has been before. And this is certainly a lot less work than hooking up a tape recorder and an analog lavalier microphone. So yeah, and now I am just procrastinating all of the other work I have to do today. That's how it goes.